And we are back.
Hi, Ish.
Hey, hey. So, shall we go to questions or?
Yes, I think we should. Maza wanted to know,
Mm-hmm.
um, what do you wish? I don't know whether she's back, but she wants to know. Maza, are you back? She's not logged in yet, so maybe we'll wait for her to join in, and then we can ask a question.
Mm.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, in the meantime, if there's any question we need to answer, we can.
Yeah, please. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
What does?
Maza wanted to know. Well, she's still not here. There's somebody who wants to know whether I am. Somebody says they grew up in LA but now live in Nairobi. They want to know how you ended up in LA.
Well, we're always moving around, but I think we came back. My wife and I, we started having children, and we did not really think that places like New York was a good place to raise a family, in the sense that, first of all, it's cold and there, in the winters are cold, and also you won't really have your children being out and about in nature and things like that. So we thought if we are back in the US for a time being, which is a very short time we've been back, we should live somewhere where at least we have outdoors. Prior to that, we lived in Nigeria, in Mauritania, in Senegal, in France. So we moved around quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now for Maza's question. She wants to know what you wish people would ask you. The festival question.
What I wish people would ask me. Well, what I wish people would ask me is always that how, let me think about it. I think it really has to do with writing. I want people to ask me questions more about literature, African literature and writing, as opposed to things about the war.
Okay.
I find that sometimes when I wrote my first book, because it was a memoir, a lot of people will read it and they will love it, but they'll forget that the reason why the story touched them was how it was written. It was not because of. There are other people who went through similar experience who wrote books that nobody liked, or they read it and didn't do anything for them. So I always wanted people to ask me about me as a writer, as opposed to me as the kid who was in the war. So but that has changed now, since I wrote 2 more books that have nothing to do with war and they're novels. So I think, but it's always a struggle when you write your first book that you write, somehow tends to define you in the eyes of people who receive you first in the space of literature. So that kind of can be good or bad in terms of how people want to hang it around your neck as an explanation, again, to the one-sidedness that people always have of us, right? Like, I've had even experiences where I've gone to give talks where people were not expecting that I would be able to be as eloquent as whatever was in their mind because of my background, And I say to them, well, if you go through war, it doesn't mean that your brain cells burn out. They don't. Actually, they become more active because you have to survive, Anyway, yeah.
Somebody wants to know, what does freedom mean to you?
What does freedom mean to me? It's a large question, but generally speaking, I think for me, freedom is choice. I think you have to give people the choice to do the things that make them happy, as long as that choice is not going to hinder other people, right? Deliberately. I think that's when people have this discussion about freedom, it's about choice. I think if you give people the right choices, then So I try to live my life that way by choosing to do the things I want to do, not what people expect me to do, not just what I want to do, because at the end of the day, that's my freedom. That makes me happy. You know, I go, I'm left with myself. Yeah.
Okay, but what happens if your freedom hurts somebody else?
Well, there is, but that's the point I was making with the choice. The idea is that, you know, I think people who have never have the absence of freedom don't know what to do with freedom. They think it just means that you can do whatever you like, whenever you like. You know, it's kind of what's going on in the world right now. A lot of people are not used to being in the situation they're in, so they're lashing out in different ways because they want to show that, well, I can do whatever I want. No, you cannot do whatever I want. Our lives intersect with others, and that's where we negotiate our choices and our freedom. You can't just have it all, right? For example, years ago when I used to live in New York, I was taking the subway, and in the morning it's always packed, and there always those few people who want to read their newspaper in the midst of that. And then when you hit them, they say to you, oh, but what's your problem? You're like, listen, I paid too. But if we all decide to read our papers at the same time in that cramped place, we cause chaos. So yes, I paid, so I have the freedom to read my paper, but I can use my intelligence a little bit to say, well, you know what? It's packed now. I could wait for the next stop. When you know what I mean. So it's also about intelligence, how you use freedom.
What is the trick to setting stories in unnamed countries? Remy wants to know.
What is the what?
The trick to setting stories in unnamed countries. How do you do it? How do you set a story in an unnamed country?
Well, I mean, for me, it's not necessarily a trick. There's always an intended country in mind. You just don't name it. And also because some of the things that I'm writing about are quite universal, or particularly for Africa. Like you were saying, Zuki, you can find these characters in any African country, you know? So I felt like it would have been a disservice to kind of say in Little Family that it was set here in Sierra Leone and is this and is that. Then all of a sudden the reader willingness is only to go to Sierra Leone, even in their imagination, right? But if it's unnamed, then the reader is reading it. They're also internalizing the information and thinking about where they are, where they've been, other things they've seen. So it opens up a bigger imaginative space if you don't name a country, particularly in this. So for me, that's what I think, you know.
Dr. Ndovu wants to know from SA, she wants to know, who are your favorite authors?
Oh, I read a lot. There are many, so I will pick just a few. So there was a period in my life when I really started reading Albert Camus, who is an Algerian French writer. So he's one of my favorite writers. So I read a lot of that because he said something that I'll paraphrase that really stuck with me, which is that the role of the writer is not to represent those who make history, but rather those who suffer history. And since I was coming from those who suffer history, I really wanted to. So I read a lot of stuff. So I like Albert Camus. I also like this woman, Edwidge Danticat. She's a Haitian woman. Yeah, she's a fantastic.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God, yeah. So I'm a big fan. You know, I was like, what is Edwidge writing? What is she right now? You know, so I love Edwidge's work. Obviously, I love the Why So Yankazi Chinua Achebe, and these are similar things you read as a kid. But I also there's also this writer Italo Calvino. He's an Italian writer from Cuban descent. And he writes some really amazing books that have, who else? Hisham, you know Hisham Mata is a Libyan writer, a guy from Libya. Yeah, he's a fantastic writer as well, you know.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I read a lot. There's another woman called Carrie Hume. I forgot where she's from. She won the Booker Prize years back about a book she wrote called The Bone People. So, so I read people from different places around the world, not just
different places, widely. Yeah.
Widely, yeah.
Nozita wants to know, which books do you often go back to?
Which book do I often go back to? It depends on what mood I'm in, actually. When I'm writing, when I'm really in the thick of writing, I tend not to read as much because I don't want certain things to come into my imagination, you know, so I tend not
And
to
then you
read.
start thinking they're your own.
Exactly, because I don't want to take in something. So what I do usually, which is I watch some really silly kung fu films, the old school kung fu films, you know, when I'm
Yeah.
writing, those are the things I do because they
Your
have no
grandfather killed my
serious
great
plot line.
grandfather. Prepare to die.
Exactly,
Type.
no plot line. It's just fighting, so I don't have to think about anything. So that's usually what I do. So that way I just watch it for pure air. So I do that a lot. It really helps me. And then
Maria
I go
wants
back.
to know. Maria wants to know, what's your main message with Little Family? Do you have a message, or were you just doing art focused around these 5 people?
No, I have a message. I think, you know, the message is simple. I think the message is really what is happening and what we're in is that in our lives, constantly we are creating and recreating bonds with people. We are recreating our sense of family, who we are, the people we are gonna be close to us for whatever given time, so we can deal with something, we can get through. So the idea of Little Family is really to explain to people the concept of family nowadays is not necessarily left to blood, you know, it's left to circumstances, to things that would happen, situations, and how you bond together to really do so. You're making me really want to get a glass of wine, even though I'm fasting, you know.
Go!
I see a lot of comments, people saying that, you know.
No, the thing about this wine, right, is I wasn't even going to drink on a Monday, but I'm only drinking to celebrate your new book.
Well, thank you. In that case, you should have even more. Then I'm all for it.
Oh no, don't worry. Look at this glass, though. Maria says, Ishmael, thank you for all you do, not just as a writer, but for Sierra Leone and the world through your work in activism. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria.
She also says your talent is celebrated in Sierra Leone, as you know.
Yes.
Deborah is asking,
mm-hmm.
Please, can you tell us your African literary influence apart from Zugi Swine, the infamous Namibian?
Well, listen, like for example, you know, I was for Little Families publication, I was asked to I forget the publication, to basically talk about 6 books, to name 6 books that that I grew up with, that introduced me to literature. So I think that kind of explains really what my influence is. And the first time I read a book, besides the Shakespeare's that was forced upon everybody when you grow up in Anglophone Africa, is that it was actually Chike and the River by Chinua Achebe. That was the first book that I read as a kid that actually I saw myself in the book. And it was the first time I read something that had a character that looked like me. I was living in a village. I wanted to go to the city. So it was like, wow, this, but he wrote it for me. So for me, that was really the beginning of beginning to think that I could do something in the creative space, even though that wasn't encouraged, you know. So
right.
Who's talking about halal wine? Somebody's talking. Sorry, I just read a comment
wants to know whether you find fans crashing on you. Yeah, get halal wine.
No, I'll drink the real wine if I. Okay, I think Zuki is coming a little bit. So, as a thank you to everybody for joining us as we wait for Zuki to come back, I'm just going to read a little bit from Little Family again. This is what Zuki and I have been talking about. So I'm just going to read a little bit as we wrap things up. Okay. So this is Kudimata, one of the characters, and she's returning from the market, as I read before. Normally she would stop, but today she came upon a strange sight. A man was sitting on the ground wearing khaki shorts, a long-sleeved white shirt, brown boots, and a brimmed khaki hat. He looked like one of those white men in the books she had read back when she was a schoolgirl, when she was living with that family who had let her stay with them a while. She pushed the memory aside and concentrated instead on the image that came to mind from one of those long-forgotten books. There were always photos of those white men standing in a bow of a boat rowed by a man so shiningly dark that he became the only point of intensity in the photo. In each photograph, the boat seemed to be heading up or down a river to discover what she did not understand then or now. Anyway, this man was not white, but he looked just as out of place. He was looking at an old map of Foloya, which was itself strange because no one around here was in the habit of looking to some piece of paper to help them understand the very land they stood upon. The map was flapping against the man's hand in the breeze, as if wanting to fly away, knowing it had no use. How could an old map help you find your way in a place that shifted constantly like the direction of the wind? The man paused, waving her near without looking up. She hesitated, but his demeanor held none of the menace she was used to encountering in men toward young women like her. Do you know where this house is? He extended the map to her, pointing at the far end. I have covered everywhere except this last place. He kept his gaze on the map, his eyes searching it for an answer as it fluttered even more violently in the wind. That house is no longer there. It fell with the last rain, Scooty told with certainty. That explains it. He took a red pen from the chest pocket that was lined with other pens of various colors and crossed out the indicated location of the offending house. Then he began to fold the map with what seemed like excessive care. Do you know where the people who lived there went? A car with tinted windows and fancy tires too slick for the landscape zigzagged its way along the road, trying and failing to avoid the potholes. The confused fellow stood and saluted, which amused Kudimata, who had caught the insignia. It was not a government car. Why are you saluting? Do you know Rolls Royce? She asked, chuckling. The man didn't answer, but held his salute until the car slowly disappeared down the mangled road. Then he repeated his question. Do you know where the people who lived there went? Why do you want to know? Suspicion rose in her as her instincts told her he was harmless. But harmless people work for wicked bosses, she thought. All right. We are not having Zuki, so I just thought I read back. I think she may be joining us just to close it up. But thank you all for listening, for your questions, and I hope you will get the book and read it. As Zuki had mentioned, it is very timely now, just how the connections and the bonds that we form to survive the circumstances we are dealt with. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, Zuki's here. Let me get Zuki back in. Let's see if she's still drinking that wine. There we go. And Zuki is back, I hope. You're welcome. You're back.
Sorry, guys. Nairobi 5G. It's cutting and not cutting and weird. I apologize.
You guys should go to 6G now.
But
since your 5G is not working, you should go to 6G.
You know.
Oh, thank you for ordering.
If we go to 6G, then we won't be able to deal with like Corona and stuff and everything, because then we won't have this festival. Yeah. But yeah, no, I didn't miss an excerpt, Maria. I actually read the book. I read the full book. That's the reason why I've been really bad at being a moderator right now, because I wanted to discuss the book quite a lot. Little Family is a really beautiful book that I think everybody should get. And it's very relevant for our times.
Thank you, sir.
BC wants to know whether you have like literary groupies throwing themselves on you.
Yes, it comes with the it comes with the territory, but you know, I think, you know, I'm always that simple village boy that I am. You know, I think my my foundation and my talent and everything comes from the humble place I come from in Sierra Leone. So I always try to show people that even though I'm a very well-known writer, I don't want them to feel that way about me. In fact, I've been to places where people are looking for Ishmael Beah, and I'm sitting right next to them, and they don't think it's me. Okay, I don't know, maybe they expect some guy to show up with his necktie, and I show up with my funny hair, you know, and they're like, "You're Ishmael?" I'm like, yeah, that's what I do.
So, quick question. Can you just show the cover again, just for everybody?
Yes.
And I will show them the cover of Radiance of Tomorrow.
This is the cover.
So these are the two novels that you guys need to get from Ishmael. Absolutely delightful, absolutely amazing, absolutely heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but very much the stories of our lives. Right. Let me see whether there are any other questions. Molara, I see you in here. Please, please, please. You guys need to get this book to Wida Bookstore. Frankie has just ordered the book.
Yes, I saw. Great. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
What else?
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. Quick question.
Yes.
Maybe to end.
Yeah.
Who are worse? Because you said you work in civil society as UNICEF ambassador and of course you're a writer. Who are worse, the literary groupies or the NGO groupies?
I'm going to have to diplomatically decline answering that question.
Wow, okay. For the record, guys, this is not wine. This is grape juice. Dr. Ndlovu wants to know, do you think literature has a role to play in achieving African unity?
Yes, absolutely. I believe perhaps this is the only chance we've got, because I think through our stories, through our writings, we open up the vastness of the continent, the remarkable intelligence there. You know, we showcase each other. We see each other more so that we don't have this sort of stereotypes we sometimes develop about this country or that place. You know, it's a common denominator that will really bring us together to see our intelligence and celebrate who we are, you know. I think it's one of those things, you know, definitely. I mean, you see it in certain countries where the arts scene is more developed, how these countries are. Also, when you push for the arts to be developed in any country, it bolsters the economy, you know. People begin to think smartly. You know, for example, look at Senegal, Dakar, for example. If you're in Dakar, it's such an art city, you know, that you feel alive. You're proud to be African because you can see all these incredible artists all over the place and things. You know what I mean? So I think that's really where. So that identity means more with art as an African. You know, it's really, I think, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Dr. Ndlovu, I saw your comment, and for that reason, there will not be any Africa Lit Sans Frontières third season, because I feel attacked. That's the end. Right. Any other questions before Ishmael leaves? He has given us more than enough of his time. And so we appreciate it, Ishmael. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I couldn't think of any place to ask.
All right. So anybody who hasn't heard it, it's on Amazon. It's called Little Family. Maria Bayo, can he come for third season? I don't know whether we're going to do third season because these people are attacking me and my feelings are hurt. BC wants to know, poetry or cocaine? It's the festival question, so this one you need to answer.
What is the question again?
What do you prefer, poetry or cocaine?
Poetry or cocaine?
Poetry or cocaine.
Can you have both?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Ishmael Beah, you can have anything.
Okay, I will take both then. You know, maybe I will do some and then I'll write some poetry and see what comes out. And then reverse the role, you know?
Okay. Thank you so much, Ishmael.
Thank you everybody for joining.
It's been really lovely chatting to you. And congratulations on the new book. I hope you do lots and lots and lots of sales.
Thank
And of course, I hope everybody still buys copies of Radiance of Tomorrow, which is also a really amazing book.
Thank you.
Congratulations again with Little
Thank
Family.
you. Thank you, Zuki.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.